The long summer wait for football is almost over. The Houston Texans training camp is on the horizon. But before we get there, we got to get through the entire roster. Preview where this 90-man situation for the Texans is. Talk about every single player, and we'll do that presented by my friends at Platinum AC and Heating. My guy Dwayne's the best in the business. When I needed a brand new air conditioner, he took care of me. Repairs, replacements, even simple preventative maintenance. Platinum AC and Heating is the best in the business. Give Dwayne a call today. So a look through the 90-man roster of the Houston Texans ahead of training camp, but where do you start? Do you go by positions? Do you go by who's the best on the roster to the last guy on the roster? No, you simply let fate decide who we talk about. There will be multiple videos going through all 90 players on the roster, but we'll get our first smattering of players here. I have before you the wheel of names for the pre-training camp preview selection of who we're going to talk about in this video. 90 names. As one comes up, we will take it off the board, talk about it, and then go to the next one. Let's get it started here over on the wheel of names. Who will be first? Who kicks off the 90-man preview? Hey, how about rookie defensive tackle Keontae Hamilton from Rutgers, the big fella. Look, late round pick for the Houston Texans, but Hamilton has some impressive stuff to the draft process, and the background is really good. He played at Rutgers, and before he was a football player at Rutgers, he was a wrestler. You know, offensive line coaches and defensive line coaches love those wrestlers. All right, and that means they're usually very tough. That means they're usually very disciplined, although the heavyweights don't have to have as much discipline because the weight cuts don't matter to them. They're usually strong, and they usually have pretty darn good balance. So when you think about what Hamilton can bring to the table, he had to play in a very tough conference for defensive linemen. The Big Ten is not easy on the big fellas up front. Really good offensive line play in the Big Ten. Hamilton had some pretty decent success, and I liked the draft process. He didn't get invited to the NFL scouting combine, but his bench press reps would have been amongst the tops of the defensive tackles that did participate at the NFL scouting combine. Sometimes the stopwatch lies to you. The weights don't lie to you. As far as his role on this Texans roster, he has to be really good in training camp to make the rosters. A lot of veterans in front of him, a lot of guys that have played a lot of football, a lot of guys that have played a lot of football for DeMeco Ryans on defense. So he's got a nice long uphill battle, and the Texans are no stranger to getting rid of a late-round defensive tackle that they drafted. They did it just last year with Marcus Harris. So it won't be easy for Keontae Hamilton to make the roster, but it's not impossible. If he doesn't make the roster, he's certainly a name that you would look at and think about for the practice squad for the Houston Texans as well. What a start to the 90-man preview. Let's get you another one here. Let's see what else the wheel of names has for us. That was right on the edge. Dalton Schultz. So from the defensive tackle who maybe he's not going to make the roster to the tight end that most of us were pretty disappointed with the performance last year from Dalton Schultz. Look, the counting stats weren't way down, but they weren't nearly as good as they had been. And Schultz played every game last year and still didn't get close to his counting stats. In fact, since he became a regular starter, it's one of the worst overall performance years of Schultz's career. The pass blocking was not good either. It was one of the worst in the entire NFL amongst tight ends that had 50 pass blocking reps, according to Pro Football Focus. It was really bad. It didn't look good out there for Dalton Schultz, but there's a lot of challenges that the team felt that also, belabored how tough it was for Dalton Schultz to do his job. So the offensive line was not very good, which kept things from maybe developing for Dalton Schultz when he had to go out there and run. And then it put Dalton Schultz in a position to go out there and block when he shouldn't have been blocking. And a couple of years ago, he wasn't that bad, but it just didn't look good last year. And the blocking scheme, it didn't look good from an effort standpoint from Schultz sometimes. And it's the matchups that they put him in, leaving him on islands against big-time defensive ends. That didn't work for the Houston Texans. It didn't work for Dalton Schultz, and it won't work again. But that's the challenge for a new offensive coordinator Nick Caley. He's got to go out there and he's got to figure out how to recapture what Dalton Schultz did well, because let's be very clear about what Dalton Schultz was. For a good portion of his career, he's been hovering around that top 10 of the tight ends in the National Football League, anywhere from probably 15 to 8 on any given year. The Texans could really use that guy. After last season, they got a not top 20 performance out of Dalton Schultz. There were probably 20 tight ends that played better than Dalton Schultz without an argument. So he's got to bounce back. I believe that Nick Caley can find a way to reutilize Dalton Schultz's good talents and keep him from being in precarious positions that don't benefit him. And part of the belief in Nick Caley is part of the reason you would be hopeful for the Houston Texans and hopeful for Dalton Schultz in this offense in 2025. Hope's not a strategy, though, so you better have a good strategy for Dalton Schultz and how you're going to use him. The wheel spins again. Who is next? We've got a defensive tackle. We've got a tight end. And now, oh, baby, how about one of the best players on the entire roster? A defensive player of the year candidate. Maybe, just maybe could find himself amongst the pass rushing elites this year, Will Anderson. Man, he has been fantastic. In fact, I would say Will Anderson has been better at his job since he was drafted than C.J. Stroud has been at his job. Now, that's tough because Will Anderson can go out there and do his job and he can win individually, and he's not as reliant on the performance of the other 10 teammates on the field for him as C.J. Stroud is. So a little bit of an unfair comparison, but Will Anderson's been everything that the Texans wanted him to be, and probably then some. The first year he had pass rushing prowess, but wasn't quite finishing all those sacks, and he affected the run game. His second year in the league, well, he had pass rushing prowess. He was finishing some of those sacks, and he affected the run game, and he transformed his body a little bit. Now, going into year 3, transformed his body again. I don't know that he's added a bunch of weight, but he's gotten on that Danielle Hunter path where he started to get really cut up. He looks very strong. The speed is still an incredible element, and saw a little bit of preview in minicamp, in OTAs. Will Anderson's he's got some new moves, okay? Now, when I do that, it doesn't look athletic. It doesn't look impressive. When Will Anderson does it and an offensive tackle just totally whiffs on him because Anderson vacated that space and it looked like he teleported to the left of the offensive tackle and then he went out there and would have had a free shot at the quarterback, it looks a whole lot more impressive. Hopefully you'll see some things come out in training camp if you get to go out there and view it. I don't anticipate you'll see any of the good moves in the preseason games if Will Anderson even gets into them, but the moves, the strength, the speed, the combination of it all creates a nearly unstoppable force for any one individual offensive lineman. Look, there's going to be some guys that can puff their chest out and tout that they had a successful rep against Will Anderson, but not many guys are going to want to face Will Anderson, going to want to go against him on Sundays. And when you start thinking about some of these offensive linemen and some of these offenses that the Houston Texans need to disrupt and really get after to take that defense to that final level, that elite level. They were very good last year. I would stop short of elite, but Will Anderson, he could be the engine, the force that takes them to that elite level. And I do believe he can find himself with even more sacks than he had last year, 11, and could find himself in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. He's got to stay healthy, though. That ankle has popped up a couple of times in these first couple of seasons, but 17 games of Will Anderson, or 16 and a half, because hopefully you don't have to play the last week of the season real hard if you're the Houston Texans. 16 and a half or 16 games of Will Anderson, that might be just enough to get into the Defensive Player of the Year conversation for the third-year Houston Texans defensive end. Man, what a player the Texans have. And, oh, by the way, his running mate on the other side's pretty darn good More players coming your way. Right after I tell you about my friends at Platinum AC and Heating. Dwayne's the best in the business. 5-star rated by the Better Business Bureau. 5-star rated on all these different rating places, and 5-star rated by me. My AC went out earlier in the summer. That was awful. Called Dwayne. He walked me through all the different options that I had. He talked to me about, hey, this is what went wrong. This is what we'd have to fix. This is how fast we can do it. And he lied, okay? He was faster than what he said. Man, his guys were here like that. And if it hadn't been raining that day, I think they'd have finished in record time. I don't know. Guinness wasn't here, but they moved fast, man. They got it done because when you don't have air conditioning, you can't sit around in a hot house. Dwayne knows that. And that's why he's got the best prices in town, got the best service in town. He's a Texans fan just like you. Call him up. Talk some AC, talk some ball, figure out if you need a repair or replacement or just simple preventative maintenance to make sure your AC's running its best. The number's right there on the screen. Save the number when you need an AC guy. You need the AC guy, and that's Dwayne at Platinum AC and Heating. Let's get some more players out here. We got to get through 90. We got to hurry up here. We got to put some oomph into it, or we can just talk about football all the way until training camp gets here, okay? Just a nonstop football fest to get us all the way to training camp. Spin the wheel. Let's see who joins Will Anderson, Dalton Schultz, and Keontae Hamilton in the conversation. How about free agent addition from the Chargers, Nick Niemann? Now, Niemann is thought of initially as sort of a special teams guy, and they didn't utilize him a ton on the defense of the Chargers, but special teams demon, Frank Ross, the special teams coordinator, loves to add a few of those guys, but Niemann is also the type of guy that I feel like the Texans could trust to go out there and play some coverage snaps at linebacker. Now, it's a crowded linebacker room, especially if Christian Harris is back and is healthy this year. So Nick Niemann's going to have to do some things both on special teams and using his coverage ability to go out there and carve himself out an opportunity. And look, just because you're really good at special teams or just because you have some experience doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to be on this roster. Think about Noah Brown last year. He had way more experience than some of the guys that made the roster after him. Of course, Noah Brown had been hurt, but there have been guys that have been depth pieces on this team that have made a little bit of money, and the next thing you know, they're looking for a job because somebody beat them out. Nick Niemann's going to have to beat some people out, but when you think about how the Texans use those backups at linebacker all over the place on special teams, from kickoffs to kickoff return to punt coverage to punt return, and then, of course, his ability to cover from the linebacker spot is a positive for him as well. I don't know that he's sticking his nose in there, stuffing a whole bunch of runs, but if a tight end is leaking out and you got to throw Nick Niemann at him, or you want to carry Niemann on the roster in case there's a running back that's catching a lot of stuff out of the backfield, maybe he can give you a fill-in spot opportunity that you feel good about. Versus throwing somebody out there that maybe have some questions. I wouldn't expect Niemann to get any sort of starter reps unless there's injuries, but a solid depth piece like him, well, you can certainly do a lot worse than Nick Niemann. Who joins Niemann and Schultz and Anderson and Keontae Hamilton in this conversation? John Mechie. Now, look, this is tough for John Mechie. This is the most difficult path to a roster spot that John Mechie's had to deal with in his past few seasons. Mechie, of course, we know about the struggles coming back from the knee injury, in addition to dealing with the unfortunate cancer diagnosis, but those things are very much in the past. John Mechie wants to get rid of him in the conversation about him, and like most of us want to move past that. What type of football player has he been? Mechie has not been excellent on the field when given those opportunities. There have been moments in training camps and practices, in games and OTAs and mini camps where the hands haven't been as sure, and he just never has been able to recapture the type of player that he was at Alabama. And that's okay, because there are obviously reasons why he wouldn't be able to exactly recapture that. But he's got to make the most of what he is now, and I don't know that he's totally done that on this roster up to this point. When he has had those opportunities, when it's been him and just a handful of other options for the Texans in the receiving game, it hasn't quite clicked for him. It hasn't been there. So with Mechie and some of the challengers that he has, it's going to be tough for him to make the roster. He's going to have to clearly, undoubtedly be better than a few different players on this roster to make the 53-man roster. Because if John Mechie is even with an undrafted free agent who you've got under contract control for the next few seasons, you take the undrafted free agent. If he's even with another veteran who's signed for more than this year, you take the veteran. And if he's not better than everybody else, then he's just not going to be able to make the team. It's a tough uphill battle for John Mechie. We've talked about that here on the channel. How does he do it? He's just got to be very, very good in training camp, in the preseason games, and he's got to create a level of confidence that you can trust him in key situations should you turn to him in a time of need in that wide receiver. Think about it. Nico Collins with an injury history, Christian Kirk with an injury history. You may need that depth at wide receiver, but Mechie's got a lot of challengers for not a lot of spots there on that offensive line. Who's next? Who joins this crew? We got a couple more names in here before we wrap this up. How about Woody Marks? Hey, how about this for a player to talk about? Woody Marks, the running back out of USC that the Houston Texans drafted in the 4th round. Now, they traded up for Woody Marks, and they sent a future draft pick that was a pretty valuable draft pick to go and get Woody Marks. So they feel strongly about the USC product. And before he was at USC, Woody Marks was at Mississippi State, and they didn't quite ever give him the opportunity to be the bell cow when he was at Mississippi State. He just was primarily kind of a fill-in, spot-back, rotational, but they threw him the ball a lot. And then they threw him the ball a lot at USC, but also let him carry the rock at USC, and he did really well with that opportunity. Now, I don't know that Woody Marks is for sure a contender for running back 2. He still feels very much like the type of player that's fighting for that running back 3 or that 3rd down running back conversation and spot on this Texans team. But I was really impressed with him at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. The pass blocking reps were really good. Obviously, the receiving was very good from Woody Marks. My questions are, if Joe Mixon's not available, can you put Woody Marks out there and can you run him between the tackles? Which is something that I would have said assuredly yes, a few of the players drafted after Woody Marks at running back could do. I don't know that about Woody Marks. So having seen him, though, at rookie workouts and minicamp and OTAs, Woody Marks is bigger. He's more solid than I remember him being in Mobile, Alabama, and then more solid than he looked at USC. So maybe he's a little bit tougher, and maybe he's got a little bit more between the tackles prowess than I'm giving him credit for. Hope we don't get to find out, because I hope Joe Mixon is healthy all year long. But if he's not, and you can rely on Woody Marks, I mean, the Texans have relied on a 4th-round running back who was a rookie before. It wasn't the best season in the world, and Dameon Pierce hasn't done anything quite like that since, but it's not out of the question that you could have a 4th-round rookie who's a little bit smaller than people think, that has a little pass-catching prowess, and maybe wasn't always trusted to run between the tackles, but then had a really good season running between the tackles. Does that sound like anybody in the NFL? Oh, Bucky Irving last year. Similar, not the same, but similar kind of conversation profile. Now, I think the Ducks, quack, trusted Irving a little bit more than all the teams that Woody Marks had been on, the Mississippi State teams and that USC team. But it's not out of the question that a 4th-round running back can have big-time impact for you on your team. Let's spin the wheel one more time. One more name to add to this conversation, this question, and it is a fantastic one. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, CeeDee, as he wants to be called, the Super Bowl champion, the new starting safety for the Houston Texans next to Kalen Bullock. And let me tell you, I know that we talk about what C.J. Gardner-Johnson did with the Eagles last year, and he was a part of the Super Bowl team. And I know throughout the run, there was a lot of conversations about Quinyon Mitchell, their rookie cornerback, and Cooper DeJean, their rookie cornerback. And in the Super Bowl, oh man, that defensive line and what the front 7 can do in Philadelphia. When you look at some of the stats, the counting stats, the advanced stats, all the different kinds of stats that you could throw together in the conversation, C.J. Gardner-Johnson was damn good last year for the Philadelphia Eagles. He was amongst one of the most highly rated safeties when it comes to some of those Pro Football Focus numbers, when it comes to some of the counting stats. Gardner Johnson was really good last year. He was really good on a team that helped set up the safety to be successful. Guess what team he's on now? A team that helps set up the safety to be successful. Think about those edge rushers, the solid and hopefully stout front seven that the Texans have, and then the cornerbacks. Come on. The cornerbacks that Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter locking things down, forcing things into the middle, forcing things into C.J. Gardner-Johnson's lap. The mentality and the mood that he brings to the secondary is going to be intriguing. He is not afraid to go in there and stick his nose in the run game. He's not afraid to go out there, talk a little trash with the opposing pass catchers. And he's not afraid to go out there and make a big play in the secondary with the ability to take the ball away, knock the ball away. This could be the type of player that was missing from the Houston Texans season most of last year when you think about the secondary. And look, Eric Murray filled in nicely for an injured Jimmy Ward, but C.J. Gardner-Johnson's much better than Eric Murray. Now, there's a little bit of worry. Why would the Eagles, fresh off a Super Bowl, didn't have to get rid of C.J. Gardner-Johnson? And they did. They just sort of dumped him in a trade for Kenyon Green. And I would tell you, if somebody got traded for Kenyon Green, that's not good for the perception. But the Eagles, they've spent a lot of their money. Tight against the salary cap. The Texans benefit from it. And you get C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who's already, I asked my buddy Brooks Cabina, who covers the Eagles. He said, so what's the deal with him? He's got a little bit of a screw loose. All right, got a little bit of a screw loose. And now you're going to put a chip on his shoulder because the Super Bowl champions, the world champs, said we don't need you. As C.J. Gardner-Johnson said, DeMeco Ryans didn't bring him to Houston to win the AFC South. He brought him to Houston to put a bull on the ring. That's what the Houston Texans want to do, and hopefully C.J. Gardner-Johnson helps them do it. So we've gotten through a few of the names so far. Which one of the names we talked about today is your favorite? You have any comments, questions, joys, or concerns about them? Let me know in the comment section down below. On your way down there, throw me a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And don't forget, this week, Channel Appreciation Week. I got some fantastic giveaway stuff for the people that support this channel. As a thank you, there will be a Google form in the description of the videos later this week for you to sign up, talk about some of the rules, some of the things that need to happen for you to get signed up. And then, of course, I want to give away some of these fun things. Got some gift cards, got some bobbleheads, got some Texans gear, got some Texans sports cards. I mean, there's all sorts of fun stuff to give away this week. Stickers, subscriptions to Houston football, the newsletter. Just appreciate everybody for the long summer support that you have all been there. We're almost ready for training camp. We got a ton more players on this roster to talk about. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Visit the fantastic sponsors. We'll talk about them throughout the course of the week. Platinum AC and Heating. Today, Dwayne's the best in the business. Talk football, talk air conditioning, and save yourself some money because Dwayne's the best in the business, the best service, and the best prices. Appreciate you watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. And I can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.